You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Hello, friends. In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to Deb Krier, and we talk about cancer. Sometimes in these introductions, I share kind of a lot about what's coming, and other times, not very much. This is one of those times where I'm just going to let the interview do the job. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go. Deb Krier, welcome to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. Are you ready for a chat?
Oh, Amy, I am so ready and very honored to be here, but I'm very much an imperfect adult.
I think I think we all are, which is why I love to call people in. I start most of my interviews, which everybody knows if they're longtime listeners, with asking people, what part of the world do you call home, Deb?
So I always tell people that I live in Atlanta, but I am from the mountains of Colorado.
Oh, very nice. Atlanta. I love it. Except the
Just a little
traffic.
north of you. Yep.
And except the traffic, but we share that. I don't like the traffic where I live either. So, in a second, we're going to get to the topic of the day. But first, I would love it if I got a chance to get to know you a little bit better. If you would share with me and the audience a hobby, a pastime, a passion project, something that's not related to family or work.
Cool. Well, this one's kind of related to family because my husband and I do it. We show dogs, in particular beagles, right? You know, Snoopy.
Oh.
And I'm actually on the board of the National Beagle Club of America. And the only thing that's more important than that in my family is my beloved University of Colorado and the buffaloes.
Very nice. I was just there. I have one kid who is choosing college. He's chosen. He did not choose
Mhm.
Boulder, but we went to go do the tour of the campus. I am a sea level dweller, Deb. I
Mhm.
do, and I pass that on to my
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
I know it's only a mile, but my body does not do well.
Well, no, but I tell you what, there is not a more beautiful campus.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it takes a while to get used to the mile high.
The mile high. I flew back.
Mhm.
I connected in Charleston, I think.
Mhm.
And it was like a miracle. It was like I walked into the airport. I'm just in the airport. I've been
Mhm.
pressurized. I walked into the airport. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that feeling in my head is gone. I'm like,
Yes.
I am at
Mhm.
sea level. Thank you.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh yeah, most definitely. And the humidity is just a little bit different.
Oh, well, that definitely, it's funny because I keep in
Mhm.
all of my winter coats, I have the
Mhm.
chapstick and things. And
Mhm.
so, but I dry out like as I'm
Mhm.
walking off the airplane, my skin
Mhm.
begins to peel,
Mhm.
all the
Mhm.
things. I'm basically a tropical flower that just falls apart as I enter the desert. But
But that's all right because tropical flowers are so beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. All right. So, topic of the day, not flowers or altitude or even favorite college teams, but we are going to talk about a time when you were diagnosed with stage 4 triple positive breast cancer and thyroid cancer. You described this as a life altering diagnosis, which I can definitely imagine. Are you ready to talk about that today?
I am. So ask me anything.
All right, very good. So I want to begin with constructing a little bit of a time frame
Mhm.
for me and the audience. So tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about how long ago this happened. Like when did you get this diagnosis
Sure.
and stuff like that?
I'm actually approaching my 10-year anniversary, which is good,
Okay,
knock
that's
on
good.
wood, right?
Yeah.
And so I was, good kid. I went in for my annual mammogram. And
Okay.
before I got home, and I'm 5 minutes from the hospital, they called and said, you need to come back.
Okay. That
Yeah.
was one of my questions was
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
did you go
Right.
through the
Yeah.
diagnostic? So we're recording this in 2025, I feel that
Mhm.
many people are under a lot of just generalized
Mhm.
stress with life.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
don't want to
just a little. Mhm.
I don't want to like I don't want to construct this in like sort of a holdout. How are you doing? Anytime I talk to somebody who's got an illness and things like that, would you share with us a little bit about how your health is today and your prognosis so that we know? 10
Sure.
years.
It's 10 years. And I am doing very well. And a big part of, I think, how I got through all of this was my sense of humor,
Okay.
and trying to make light of everything. Now, am I Pollyanna? No, ask my husband and he will tell you I have really bad days. But yeah, but if it could go wrong, it did.
Yeah.
There were 3 times where my husband was told I was not going to make it.
Okay.
There was one of those times where I remember hearing the doctors argue over how fast I was going to die that day.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, excuse me, I get to vote. you know, um,
Oh my goodness.
and yeah, and yeah, I had catastrophic complications. My doctors call me the miracle girl, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But yeah, I mean, it has definitely been a journey. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with basal cell carcinoma, which sounds very icky nasty, and it's just a pretty simple skin cancer.
Yep.
And then 2 years ago was thyroid cancer. And that was a totally different cancer. So I've had 3 separate cancers. The thing about the thyroid cancer is we found it when we were doing just one of my normal follow-up scans. And they said, well, everything looks good, but
Oh my
you know,
goodness. All right.
and so it was a total fluke because I had had no symptoms and we caught that extremely early.
All right. So basal cell, a lot of people, especially
Mhm.
those of us who live in the South or in a
Yes.
sunny place, as we age, most of us are going to come into the time where
Yeah.
the dermatologist said
Oh yeah. Mhm.
that's not, that one doesn't
Mhm.
send me off the
No, no.
den because I hear
And
that
I
all the
tell you,
time.
redhead, freckly kid that never knew what sunscreen was. It's amazing that I made it to age before I was actually I would have been 59. Or no, probably a little bit younger than that when I got that diagnosis. I'd never been to a dermatologist. Had never had the need to because I kept an eye on things.
I went to a dermatologist for eczema when I was in my
Mhm.
early 20s. Like you, I grew up in a
Mhm.
season of suns. We didn't really we wore sunscreen, but it was the oily kind to improve the tan or
Oh,
extend
see, I grew up
or
with
extend.
iodine and baby oil.
So that's not, I never did. So, or to, so I went to the dermatologist and I'll never forget. I had eczema, because I was under a lot of stress.
Mhm.
And she said to me, she said, so you might see in the news that some people are saying that you should be outside without sunscreen for 20 minutes. They're
Yeah.
not talking to you, Mrs. Stone.
No.
They're
Mhm.
not talking to
Mhm.
you. You should put on sunscreen the
Mhm.
minute you wake up.
Mhm.
Because I don't have red hair, but I do have all of
Mhm.
the lack of melanin that
Mhm.
comes
Yep.
with my
Mhm.
heritage. But okay, so 10 years ago, annual mammogram. So
Mhm.
you were feeling fine. You were feeling
Right.
healthy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And what they diagnosed was micro calcifications. Now,
Okay.
I worked for an oncologist and I worked for the American Cancer Society, but that was a new one on me. And I tell people I know just enough to be dangerous, right? So I turned to what we should never do. Don't do this, folks. Never ever.
Everybody does
Doctor,
this.
I
Everybody does
know,
it.
Dr. Google, right? And discovered that microcalcifications are something that every woman of a certain age has as our hormones in our bodies change. It's just
Okay.
these little things that happen. Obviously, the vast majority of the time, there are no problems, and they are so small that the computer saw it. The person reading the mammogram, it cannot see it with a naked eye, and so they said stage 0. Let's just kind of watch this. Cool. I was like, okay, this is fun. Didn't even get an oncologist, didn't feel the need
Okay.
to. Did have a surgeon that I was referred to. She did a couple really fun biopsies that came back
That's
negative.
sarcasm for
I
everybody who's
know that
listening. They're
was,
not fun.
yes, they are not fun. And and yeah, anytime now I'm getting very used to the needles and the pokes and all, but no, those were not fun. And it was called a stereotactic biopsy.
Okay.
Yeah, now, but those were negative, so we
Okay.
weren't concerned. And then finally, the doctor said, you know what? We need to pull some lymph nodes. Let's just go ahead and do a little bit more detailed type of testing. So, but it's still, we were not at all concerned. And I remember, I'm in recovery, and she said, well, she said 8 of 12 lymph nodes were positive for cancer.
Whoa.
Nobody, I know. And so I went from stage 0 to stage 3, poof, right?
Yeah.
that's when I got the oncologist. That's when, we move forward with treatment. And I chose personally for me, and it is a decision that everyone must make for themselves, to do the traditional route. I was going to do chemo, surgery, radiation.
Okay.
It was the chemo that about did me in. I got a reaction that happens less than 1% of the time because I am special. Um, and that was what I ended up in the hospital, in and out of ICU and surgeries for 7 weeks, because I
Oh,
got septic shock, and which is 75% of the time fatal. But and in amongst all of that time, I happened to tell somebody, oh, I've got a rib on the bad side that hurts. Another really fun biopsy, and of the bone, of my rib bone, and that came back as inconclusive,
oh.
which the doctor said, you know what? We're just going to say stage 4. That way we can do the treatments that we want, and not really have to worry too much. And I've been extremely lucky. We have very, very good health insurance. And so I recognize that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's been a challenge, but a, a very interesting one also.
So let's back up. So you're healthy, you're
Mm-hmm.
following the
Right.
instructions to take
Mm-hmm.
care of yourself. You go in for a preventative
Mm-hmm.
screening, which we do
Mm-hmm.
pretty much annually after a
Mm-hmm.
certain age.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it's more than one test, which is even extra
Yes.
fun. But
Mm-hmm.
the what is the time frame? So first it's like, okay, this is a little abnormal. It's 0. And
Mm-hmm.
then how long is it before they say,
So it
before
was,
they do the lymph nodes?
yeah.
How long do you go from, oh, everything's fine
Yeah.
to, wow, big.
So yeah, fine in May of 2015.
Okay.
Had my mammogram that they went ew at in June of 2015. Several things throughout the summer, and it would have been August, the end of August, where they pulled the lymph nodes and said,
Okay.
oh, there is a problem. And then I had my first chemo, which then did me in, the end of October.
Okay.
And
So
ended up,
a little bit of
yeah.
a delay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Take us back to that time. Um, And it seems you're through it, and this is a
mm-hmm,
little while, and it seems a little bit like maybe a gratuitous question, but I
mm-hmm,
think it'll be helpful for people who are
mm-hmm.
listening who
Sure.
have never gone through it or are at a different stage. How we experience things changes with time, right? Like
Mm-hmm,
once it's complete
mm-hmm,
and we're on the other side. If you can think back to that time in August
mm-hmm,
where you shifted from thinking
mm-hmm,
that it was irregular and
mm-hmm,
0 to getting the information that it
mm-hmm,
was 3 and you were going to have
mm-hmm.
to choose for chemo. Can you describe a little bit about how that felt at the
I
time?
was annoyed.
Really? All right, that's
I
not all
was,
right, annoyed. Okay.
yeah. And I very distinctly remember telling the doctor, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that.
Okay.
She looked at me like, well, make time, right? Um, were there tears? Yes. And I had gone to that appointment by myself because we didn't think there was going to be any issue. And so my husband had not gone. And so yeah, I'm in the parking lot calling him, going, we've got a big problem. But all along I was like, okay, what do we need to do next and how are we going to fix this? Um,
What was going on in your life that you said you didn't have time for it?
just life, right?
Okay.
I do have my own business. I have a marketing firm, Wise Women Communications. It was and still is going merrily along. But, I also knew that all of a sudden was going to have a totally different focus for my life. And at that point, no idea what we were going to, what type of treatment, any of that stuff. I mean, because I hadn't met with an oncologist yet. But I do remember thinking, this was not in the plan, right? It's not
Right.
on our bucket list.
Right. It's
And
not on most people's
right,
plan is the
right.
thing.
Mm-hmm,
One of the reasons to tell all these stories and talk
mm-hmm,
about them is that it's something about
mm-hmm,
humanity, right? When you
mm-hmm.
plan your wedding, you don't think about the fact that it can rain outside. Like
Right.
somebody
Mm-hmm,
needs to tell you, hey, do you want a tent or do you want a
mm-hmm.
backup plan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
When you're
Mm-hmm,
planning your
mm-hmm,
vacation, you always visualize
mm-hmm.
the good weather, not the
Right.
bad weather.
Right. But take that umbrella.
Right.
Mm-hmm,
It's good when you're going
mm-hmm,
through the, right. And so knowing that these things are
Hmm.
out there and can happen to us is very different
Hmm.
from actually having it pop
Right.
up in our own
Hmm.
lives.
Right.
And I would not have selected the word annoyed as a potential
I
reaction, but
was. Hmm.
I love that
Hmm.
you chose that.
Hmm.
So you immediately said that you called your husband from the
Hmm.
car. I mean, you were so confident that you were not
Hmm.
going to have this, that you didn't even take
Yeah.
anybody to the
Hmm.
hospital with you. So you call him from the car and you
Hmm.
say, "We have
Hmm.
some stuff that's
Hmm.
changing." Let's talk
Right.
about what kind of support you had
Hmm.
at this time.
Well, I couldn't have done it without him. I mean, that really is just the thing, and that is something that I tell people is you have to build your support system. And it was interesting because here we were in Atlanta. We had been here 2 years. Moved here from the Denver metro area.
Okay, so you were new to town.
Yes, new to town. And I had been networking for business, so I wasn't without contacts, and that is actually how I got my oncologist, was through one of my business contacts. But one of the thoughts was, should we go back to Colorado?
Yeah.
Of course, my first thought was my oncologist that I had worked for, who was an absolutely delightful man. And then I, of course, realized, okay, I worked for him 30 years ago, didn't even know if he was still alive, but
Right.
probably not practicing, right? Um, and so, because, yeah, if that had been an option, yeah, I would have gone back to him. Partially because I think he helped shape my philosophy. It was over 35 years ago since I worked for him. And I remember, and I was office staff, not medical. And I remember him telling patients, 99% of this is in your head. If you
Really?
think you will get better, or if you think you will survive, you will survive. If you think you're going to die, you're going to die. Now, he wasn't saying you're going to go, ooh, and be all
Right.
better. You still might only live hours, weeks, days, whatever. But your mentality during that time was what was going to be so important. If you curl up your toes and say, I'm going to die, that could be 20 years from when you get that diagnosis, right? But you're going to live a
Yes.
horrible, miserable life in there. But how are you going to live your life? And yeah, and I really did think, well, he taught me well. And so yeah, it was okay. Take a deep breath, feel sorry for yourself.
Right. You can't push through that.
And yeah, and know that that's perfectly normal. And then think, okay, now what's next?
Okay. So one of the decisions you had to make was what type of treatment. And
Hmm.
you already covered this. You
Hmm.
very distinctly said it's a
Hmm.
personal decision, and you
Hmm.
chose I mean, I don't know, like, so we'll call it traditional. I don't
Hmm.
know that that's a great
Yeah,
word
because
for
it's
it, to be
also different
honest, but
anymore. Hmm.
right. But I
Hmm.
don't know what all the options are.
Hmm.
But, so you had
Hmm.
surgery to
Hmm.
remove the masses that you
Hmm.
could. You went through chemo and radiation, which are
Hmm.
the medical
Hmm.
treatments. How long was, if between October and then August and then the fall, between when
Hmm.
you planned those,
Hmm.
how long was your first, I'm going to phrase this in like a
Hmm.
terrible way, but first round of treatments?
That's exactly what they call it.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
round of chemo. Yep. And so it would have been 4 or 5 months probably from the original oopsie daisy to when I got the drugs. And I had, because excuse me, because these little floaty things were floating throughout my body. We chose a very aggressive type of chemotherapy. And so altogether it was 8 different drugs. And I was at your first treatment, and I did have a port put in my shoulder. I highly recommend that for somebody who's going to have lots of IVs and things like that. But it took over 8 hours, because initially they do the drug, they do, and it all depends on what you're getting, and it's all very different. But on mine, each one had to be done one at a time. Sometimes they can mix them, some things like that. But they also do it very slowly to make sure that your body can tolerate it. And then as things progress, they will speed it up. But yeah, and I remember, I'm like, it's lunchtime. So I discovered Jimmy John's delivers to an oncology
True.
floor.
And so this is the scene that if we haven't been through it, that we might see in the movie where you're sitting in the chair with the other
Yeah,
people
with the
getting
tube.
with the tube. Yeah, it's made sort of
Mhm.
famous. So you have a
Yeah.
bad reaction
Mhm.
and end up
Mhm.
very, very sick.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
this,
Mhm.
so I think you foreshadowed this.
Mhm.
Is this where the conversation was with between the doctor and your husband, where
Mhm.
it was like
Yes.
that she's not
Yeah.
going to make it?
Oh yeah. And so yeah, so I had my first round of chemo. And then Halloween was like a day or two later, gave out candy. I mean, I felt perfectly fine. And then several days later, I started feeling puny. And I thought, well, I had this massive round of chemo, right?
Right.
And sent my husband off to work. I mean, the neighbors were here and knew what was going on. And so, I figured, and everybody was kind of banding together, right? Um, and then the next day I felt worse. And then it was, oh crap, we need to call an ambulance.
Right. Okay.
Because um I knew enough to know the symptom that I had, which was extremely high temperature and extreme pain, was not a normal chemo reaction. Now, one of the things I also always tell people is there is nothing, and I'm putting this in my little air quotes, normal. Like they might tell you, people have chemo and lose their hair and get nauseated. Not everybody.
Right.
And so all of these, so we've been in contact with my doctor this whole time. Hey, this is what's going on, yada yada yada. And so the fire department came, and I'm like I am normally. I'm jibber jabbering with them.
You're a
I'm
very
I,
perky, peppy person.
yes, and so they plunked me into the ambulance, and like I said, we're 5 minutes from the hospital. We're tootling off down the road, and we stopped. And I'm like, why are we stopping? To this poor EMT who's thinking this lady is just bat crap crazy. And he said, well, it's a stoplight. I remember saying, I don't get lights and sirens. Hours later, I woke up. I mean, I crashed right then. And I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure I got lights and sirens. But that was when they discovered that my colon had perforated.
Oh,
And so, and so I needed immediate surgery. And the surgeon was saying, why are we bothering? She won't make it through the day. And the oncologist was saying, you will do this. Now obviously he did. But yeah, I mean, it was very interesting.
so that part of
Mhm,
that discussion
mhm.
you learned after the fact, right? Because
Mhm.
you were asleep.
I remembered it now. I
Okay.
remember it slightly different, but my husband said, "Oh no, that's pretty close to." I mean, I remember him being that tragic thing.
Oh
And he
my
said
goodness.
they weren't quite like that, but pretty close. And so, but yeah, so go in for emergency surgery. Now, here's one of those things that happened that I can't imagine. So I'm an only child. My mother at that point lived in Southeast Kansas. And so he had to call her
Yeah.
and say, you need, now she of course knew I had chemo and all that stuff, but he had to call her and say, you need to get here as soon as you can. And it's probably not going to be soon enough. And I just can't imagine being on either end of that conversation, right?
Yeah, most people
Yeah.
will make that call at some
Mm-hmm,
point.
mm-hmm, right.
I right when my
Mm-hmm,
dad died of heart
mm-hmm,
disease, and I had to make that call to
mm-hmm,
my brother.
mm-hmm,
And that's one of the things we do a terrible job
mm-hmm.
preparing each other to do
Right.
because it
Mm-hmm,
is a thing that we should talk
mm-hmm,
about. It's like, how do you want to do
mm-hmm.
this?
Right.
And how do you want to have that
Mm-hmm,
conversation? Now, you
mm-hmm,
had worked for an oncologist.
mm-hmm.
You were not a spring chicken. You were not like in your 20s.
Right.
Had you and your husband had conversations about like living wills
We
and
did.
how we want to die and stuff
Yeah,
like that?
we had those conversations because I'm one of those organized people. If you had ever met my mother, she passed away last year. She had her funeral written out,
Which is
instructions, right?
very
Here,
helpful. Very
yes,
helpful.
here is the
Thank you.
music you will have, all of this various stuff. And so and so when we had kind of talked about things, but when I knew that things were going to be a little bumpier than what we had expected, I did do a will. I did do a living will. Now we have since made it much more detailed and much more
Sure.
formal because I just did the internet version.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, we do that, and I tell people that is something that please do when you're very healthy. you
Yes.
know, and you're not saying bad things. I mean, have your will, update it as needed, and have your power of attorney and your medical power of attorney.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that medical power of attorney, your beloveds, your friends, your whoever don't make those decisions.
Right.
The hospital staff, the doctors, now they're going to consult with you, yes,
Yeah.
but they can override it. And so make sure that you have taken, and again, it's a simple form. Google it. This is one time where
Yep.
you can do that. Make sure you get the ones for your state.
Yeah, they're different in every state.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the forms are critical, and I'm not here to advise
Right.
people about
Mm-hmm.
the forms. I think the
Mm-hmm.
conversations are as
Mm-hmm.
important as
Right.
the form. It's
Right.
like,
Mm-hmm.
if this happens, what do
Mm-hmm.
you want to do? And
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
these are not fun
Mm-hmm.
conversations. And I
No.
think
Mm-hmm.
but they are empowering in the way that you
Mm-hmm.
get to make the decision
Mm-hmm.
or voice your
Yes. Mm-hmm.
decisions
Mm-hmm.
before it's
Mm-hmm.
needed.
Right.
And otherwise, you're putting somebody else in a position to make it, or you're
Right.
putting yourself in a
Mm-hmm.
position where it'll be made for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
I was guessing that you guys had probably
Mm-hmm.
had that, but your husband is not on the call, so we can't ask him how he felt. But I'm sure that was not an easy call. I'm sure your
Mm-hmm.
mom was really rattled
Mm-hmm.
by it, but she did make it on time,
She
and
did.
you pulled
Yep.
through
Oh yeah.
the.
Stayed for 4.5 months.
She was not letting
Yikes.
you out of your sight. She was like, "I'm
Well, yeah,
here.
because
I'm going
we
to help."
kept having, I had multiple complications, and and I remember we sat her down. When she started to rearrange my kitchen, it was like, no,
Yeah,
no, and we told her it's time.
yeah,
You need to go back. We need to start trying to live our lives. And she said, but what if something happens? And I said, it will,
yeah.
and then we'll deal with it. And so she did. She very grudgingly, and she was not happy. She went home, and I did have more complications after that. Ended up
Yeah.
back in the hospital several times. But obviously nothing is as catastrophic.
So you shared on the intake form that you and I had not met before today. You're obviously
No.
a very optimistic person, but you said instead of letting this define you, you turned your journey into a mission to empower
Mm-hmm.
others.
Right.
And I want to dig
Mm-hmm.
into when that became something
Mm-hmm.
that came front of mind because you were very busy being sick
Mm-hmm.
and getting well,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
from one catastrophe to
Mm-hmm.
another, from an urgent situation to another. And so it would have been completely reasonable to
Right.
just be like, I'm going to be a patient and deal
Mm-hmm.
with my own stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
when did that come to mind that you were like, all right, this is more, I want to do more than
Right.
just be
Mm-hmm.
my story?
Well, it was my business coach's fault.
Okay. All right.
She and I were talking about business things, right? And she knows my whole story, because she's also a friend. So she knows about, the ups, the downs, the icks, the ucks. And uh and it's been about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
She shook her finger at me. We were on Zoom. She shook her finger at me and she said, you didn't go through everything you went through without using it to help others. And I said, but I don't want to be cancer girl. Right. And that was
Which
part of
I
it.
hear you with that.
Yeah.
I hear you with that.
I
Yeah.
want to put it in the past. Now, the
Yeah.
funny thing is 10 years out, I'm still in active treatment. I go in every 21 days. Um, but yeah, I didn't want to be the face, the
Right.
whatever. But I realized she was right. Because people were asking me for help and for support and things like that. So we came up with this coalition, and it is called tryingnottodie.LIVE. That's the website URL also. And the trying not to die comes from the fact that, when something catastrophic happens, and sometimes not, sometimes it's just people, we get so caught up in trying to not die that we forget that we have to live our lives.
Yeah.
And that was what I told my mom, because I got the face one time when some medical person had come and gone, and I went, what? And she said, you did not say thank you. And I said, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, Mom, I'm trying to not die." you know?
Yeah.
And but yeah, so it's a way for people to be supported, whether they have cancer themselves or if they are supporting someone who has cancer. And to be in kind of this nurturing tribe. I tell people I am a warrior. I am, you call me a patient, I really make a face at you. But I am a warrior, and we have to build our tribe around us. And tribe members come and go,
Yeah.
and as the need is. But yeah, it's all about how can we support each other on this journey.
Very nice. I appreciate you sharing that. And I also just want to throw some weight on the fact that it is a choice.
Mhm.
It is a choice. Not everybody wants to be the poster child for
Mhm.
different pieces of their
Right.
life, and
Mhm.
and I think that's fair
Mhm.
because we deserve to be more. We deserve to be more than one single
Right.
part of our
Mhm.
identity,
Mhm.
and we also deserve to be able to compartmentalize it.
Mhm.
Like
Oh
you
yeah.
can be you
Yeah.
can be your business
Mhm.
owner at
Mhm.
the networking
Mhm.
meeting, and you can be a gardener at your house, and
Mhm.
that you don't
Right.
have to try and
Mhm.
choose the two. But
Mhm.
there is a choice of, do
Mhm.
you want to do it? And I'm sure it's a ton of work. So then so this suggestion came to you from somebody else
Mhm.
and you heard it and then you thought about it and you were like, I don't know if I want to do that. Why do you feel that it's important to now stand up and empower other people who are going through this journey on their own?
One of the biggest things I hear is, people, and no matter what their support system is, they still say, I feel so alone and I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And I tell, we laughed about it at the start. Don't do Dr. Google, folks. you know?
I
um,
think that's good advice, but I got to tell you, I always do it.
Oh,
I
I did
always
earlier
do
this
it.
year. I had an ultrasound that came back with some questionable things. What do? I immediately go to Google and put
Yeah.
it in, and then just scared myself half to death, right? Um, and I knew better. I knew better than to do that. But yeah, it's um, you know, we are alone. We don't know what to do. I mean, I had somebody contact me earlier this week who said she was going in to meet with her doctor. She had had some questionable things. She had absolutely no idea where to even start.
Yeah.
And my response to her, and she actually was local. I said, "Do you want me to go with you?" And we kind of laughed about the fact that my husband was not with me for the big appointments, folks, especially the ones where they are saying, "Here's what's going to happen." Take somebody with you, because when
If you've
you're
got
told
someone, yeah.
yes, yeah, or find somebody,
Yeah.
take a friend, take your neighbor, take somebody, because if somebody says, "Hey, Amy, you have cancer," your brain goes all
Yeah.
right, that's the technical term for it.
Yep.
And you don't remember the questions you want to ask.
Nope.
And so have somebody there with you. Record it. And if the doctor has a problem with you recording it, that's a different problem. And I've had doctors who have said, "Oh, it's a HIPAA violation." I'm like, "Oh no, I know HIPAA. I can record mine. I just can't record somebody else's
Oh, interesting.
without their
Yeah.
permission, right?" Um,
That makes
and
sense.
so yeah, yeah,
That makes
because
sense.
you have to advocate for yourself, but you might need somebody else to help advocate for you.
That makes absolute sense. I mean, it is an overloading situation. And listen, this happens. We can dial this back. So your
Mhm.
diagnosis was very serious and
Mhm.
scary. But when you've got a fever and you go in for a
Right.
strep culture and they're giving you the
Mhm.
instructions, you don't remember what they're
No, you
saying
go
and you
home and you
forget.
go, "When am I supposed to take that medicine?"
Exactly. That's
Mhm.
why they write it
Mhm.
down again.
Yes.
That's why the pharmacist is
Mhm.
like, here's what you do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so on and so forth. And so I think that's really, really important. I think that normalizing the idea, and I have not gone through what you went through, and I don't want to make it sound like I have, but that sensation that something has gone
Mhm.
wrong when you
Mhm.
feel like you're alone in a
Mhm.
situation. Nothing, there's no way you can be surrounded by people in a
Right. Mhm.
crowded room and still have that sensation of
Mhm.
isolation.
Right.
And
Oh yeah.
so, like,
Mhm.
it's not a sign that something has gone wrong,
Mhm.
but it is an
Mhm.
opportunity to build people to support you. And one of the things that I'll throw out is that there are many, many people who go through these things who are not necessarily these things, but there are, if you are somebody who does not have family in town or whatever, you can talk to a medical office and they'll help
Yes.
you find people to help
Yeah,
you.
they'll provide you
Yeah.
with an advocate, a social worker, whoever. If you're in.
They do start by making an assumption
Mhm,
that you've got people. My poor father, when he
mhm,
was alive, he was getting
mhm,
cataract surgery,
mhm,
which is supposed to be easy
mhm,
peasy. And he lived by himself.
mhm,
All the kids were already moved
mhm,
away, and something went wrong, and he was supposed to go to another place.
mhm.
And they were like, they just figured that somebody was with him. And so they sent him out, and like the doorman came, brought him back up and was like, this guy cannot be on his own. Like, you guys need to help him. He can't just have him. And I
Mhm,
think back
mhm.
to that. I'm like,
Right.
why
Mhm,
didn't you like,
mhm.
ask for help? And he's like, I was just following the instructions. He was just
Oh
trying
yeah.
to do the best he could.
Yeah.
But that
And they told
goes to
him,
the
you
point.
go do. And he said,
Yes.
I go do.
Okay.
Mhm,
And that goes right to your point. That's like,
mhm.
you can't actually be trusted to do this on your own. You're going to need
Yes.
some,
Mhm,
you might need some
mhm,
helpers.
mhm,
And be thankful for
mhm,
those who are
mhm.
around you.
Right.
Obviously,
Mhm,
obviously, obviously. All
mhm.
right. So this is an amazing story, and you are a very uplifting person. And I want to thank you for sharing all of these things. In a
Oh,
minute,
thank
we're going to
you.
do the final questions. I want to give you a chance to
Mhm,
very directly tell people
mhm,
what you do, how they can connect and
mhm,
follow you online. And you can give both of those
mhm,
things, your marketing business
mhm.
and the empowerment thing, if you want.
Right. Well, we'll leave the marketing business aside.
Okay.
But yeah, so go to the website, www.tryingnottodie.LIVE. And one of the things that you will find there is a link to our Facebook group. And that's a great place to get support. It is a private group. I let anybody in, but I keep it as a private group because we don't want the people in there who are going to cure us. And I've had
Right.
a couple of those, right? My protein drink will cure you. I'm like, I don't think so. But we have that, and then launching before this goes live, but we're still in the pre-launch phase, is yourcancercoach.live, and that is
Okay.
for executives who have cancer and are told, hey, this is what's going on, and you're thinking, well, but I got a business I have to run.
Yeah.
And so those are the services and that we provide.
Those are amazing. All right. So that link for people who are listening and watching the podcast that are not in a place where they can write it down, the easiest way to get it is to subscribe to Imperfect Adulting's email community, because then I send it
Perfect.
right to your email box.
Mm-hmm,
But it is also in the show notes
mm-hmm,
wherever you're listening to the podcast. All right. Deb, are you ready for the
I'm
final
ready.
questions?
Bring on those fun questions.
Here we go. All right. What is a song or a piece of music that no matter how many times you hear it, it still moves you?
This is my fight song.
Okay. I love
Yep.
that. All right, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you think of a book that you enjoy so much that you've read it more than once?
Hmm. It's actually a business book, which is kind of strange. How to play like a man but win like a woman.
How to Play Like a Man but Win Like a Woman. Okay, I have not
Mm-hmm.
read that. All right, that's a
Mm-hmm.
good suggestion. Very good. If I was planning a vacation for you and
Mm-hmm.
I offered you, it's a week
A
vacation, and I
week.
offered you a week at a theme park like Disney, so like roller coasters and characters,
Mm-hmm.
an all-inclusive cruise or luxury resort, or a luxury hotel in an international city with museums and culture, which do you choose?
Oh, definitely the third option.
And in a luxury hotel in
Oh
an
yeah,
international
and I am
museums
not a
and
Mickey. No, not a Mouseketeer.
fair, fair, fair. Everybody gets to make their own choices.
Mhm.
That's it, Deb. Thank you so
Well,
much for being a
thank you for
wonderful
the
guest.
honor.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Obvi again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adult to your adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.